And we're back with Andor Season 2, and we're going through everything. We're breaking down parts, we're reviewing parts, and I'm giving you all the information that you may have missed. There's references, there's Saw Gerrera, there's planet names you may not have heard of, the Tarkin Massacre, Dakar pops up. There's lots more information to talk to you about. So we're going to get into all of that and more coming up in this Andor discussion.
He's such an interesting little dweeb. Like he's like downtrodden by his mum, but he gets all these little joys in life. When he gets a bit of praise or something, he's like, this might be the greatest moment in my life.
I mean, in a very brief history of Saw Gerrera, he starts off as just a random character in Clone Wars on Onderon, which Onderon gets mentioned in Andor. His sister Steela gets killed in a fight against a separatist.
Rogue One bubble, so you got Rogue One and Andor Season 1 and 2, Rebels, of course, and I think this might be my favourite era.
So I am here with Dave. Dave is one of my confidants in Clone Wars conversations. So Dave, Math and I, we went through all episodes of the Clone Wars, we went through all of Star Wars Rebels, and we had a really great time going through them and breaking down all of that sort of stuff. So Dave has become one of my de facto Star Wars sort of, I said confidants, but I don't know how else I would really describe it, but we go on all the Star Wars journeys together, and we've got plenty more Star Wars content coming out. So it is a delight to welcome one half of the VHS Strikes Back and Chris and Dave's reality TV cast, and one of the founders of Comics in Motion, onto Star Wars Chit-Chat, and that is Mr. Dave Horrocks. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. These 3 episodes, what did you think about these in general?
So yeah, very good. I wish I could remember the Ghorman kind of greeting, and I just thought, I'll give you the Ghorman greeting, but actually it's just escaped my mind. Then it was weird, wasn't it? It was something like that. First 3 episodes, really. I think I didn't go back and watch Season 1, so I just jumped straight in, and I thought, I ain't got a fucking clue. I can't remember where everything finished. I remember the basic things. There's Andy Serkis who made a sacrifice. I remember the main highlights and the feel of it, the aesthetic, the texture of the whole storytelling aspect of it. And I was like, oh, God, right, yeah. I mean, I remember Andor, but I can't remember all the moving pieces and whatever, and where everything finished. So for me, I liked being back in this world. And again, just the level of storytelling, the level of production. I know you're a little bit of a acolyte apologist. I know you, not because you feel you have to, but because you genuinely liked it.
Yeah, I did.
Whereas I could not get over the aesthetic of it. The Book of Boba Fett as well, when the guys all turn up on, on Tatooine with their shiny Vespers. There are things that just feel off. But the cinematography, and not just the way things are shot, but the costumes, the set design and everything is just such high quality. It's like you're watching a HBO show, isn't it? Such attention to detail. But I'd say for the first 2 episodes, I'm sort of enjoying it and appreciating it, I think, more than anything. And then it got to episode 3, and you get to that moment where you're like, holy shit, we've never been here in Star Wars. And I slightly shocked that it was going there. And then when you get Cassian turning up and taking fucking names, I'm like, yes, get in, you bastards, because you see the darker side of the Empire, don't you? You see the real negatives of it. You're understanding why people are rebelling against this. And I think episode 3, I was in again, but I think before that I was just enjoying it.
Yeah, I think with Andor, I think all of these episodes are going to be like that, which is, it's going to be, each chunk is going to be, first 2 is like the first one setting things up. Number 2 is a bit more wheels are turning stuff. 3 is the crescendo. That's kind of going to be how it's going to be. That's how the first 3 were, as you said. That's how these ones were. And to be fair, in the prior season, the Kino Loy, the Andy Serkis ones in the prison, Arkina 5, they were very much like that. The heist arc, that was very much like that. You know, it was just that with season 1, it was 3 episodes, then the one-off, the announcement, the 3 episodes for the prison, then the 2-episode finale. So it's slightly different, but this is 3. But I will say, yeah, with Acolyte, I am an Acolyte apologist to a degree. I think it is probably still one of the worst of the Star Wars series, but I still think it was really good, but it's got prequel syndrome, which is the great bits are phenomenal. You know, the middle 2 episodes, day night, when the stranger played by Manny Jacinto goes nuts and just kills everyone. It's one of the coolest collection scenes in all of Star Wars. Phenomenally choreographed, looks amazing, loads of great stuff we've not seen before. It's just 2 flashback episodes, especially the second one's anticlimactic. As you said, the sets do not look great, unfortunately. It does look very volumey, which Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett did have quite a bit as well. I still think Book of Boba Fett is the worst series, and I think Acolyte is wrongly maligned, and that's why at some point in Clone Wars Conversations, probably next year, I'm going to get you guys to rewatch it, so we can really see when we've had a bit of distance from it and watching it in kind of one go to really see if it works or not. But I don't need to apologise for Andor. This is the one show I always say is that no one needs to apologise for Andor, because Andor's one of those shows where it's just, as you said, the set design's phenomenal, the acting is next level, the script, oh my god, in these episodes especially, has some of my favourite dialogue I've ever seen in Star Wars. So I love not apologising for Andor, unlike Acolyte, unlike Book of Boba Fett. Even Mandalorian to a degree. You know, Mandalorian's great, but it's very episodic, which is fine to a degree, but there's weaker parts. There's never more than like 20 seconds of Andor I've ever seen that feels like it's weaker. You know, there might be the odd tiny bit where you go, does that fully work? Or maybe I've got a mild critique of how that could be slightly better. Outside of that, it's really hard to critique this in like with a critical lens without being just gushing over it. So we've got lots to talk about, and as I said, I've got loads of little fun bits and pieces. There's connections everywhere. There's the Star Wars Rebels connection to Secret Cargo, which is going to be next week, really. So I won't really delve into that too much, but next week is I'm really excited for. But I think I've got Spider down on the pod, and I can't remember if he's seen Rebels. So I feel like it's weirdly lined up that next week I've got the individual who's potentially not seen one of the main episodes that connects to it, which I guess will probably be good for the audience.
I've got a feeling he's seen one. He might not have seen Rebels and seen Clone Wars or something
one
like
of the
that.
other. I can't remember. But Mon Mothma, you know, played by Genevieve O'Reilly, phenomenal, and she does show up a lot in that. But what we'll try and do kind of generally is what I did last week, which is instead of necessarily going chronologically, because it's quite hard to wrap my head around going back and forth. We will generally focus on chunks. So essentially, as Jack said last week, quadrants. So it's kind of like what we've got here is we've got the Syril stuff on Ghorman. We've got Andor and later with Bix. We've got Mon Mothma and Luthen, and then we've got Saw Gerrera. They're the main parts. We've got the ISB bits a little bit as well, but kind of those 4 main parts of story, and we'll kind of break those down. Otherwise, we're going to be going all over the place. So you are the guest. Do you have a preference of any of those where you'd like to start? Andor and Bix, Saw Gerrera, Mon and the Party, or Syril and the ISB?
So I'm going to start with Syril, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Because he's such an interesting little dweeb. Like he's like downtrodden by his mum, you know, but he gets all these little joys in life. When he gets a bit of praise or something, he's like, this might be the greatest moment in my life. I know he's a baddie. I know he's on the Empire side and everything. He's trying to play this double agent sort of role in Ghorman, but I can't help but like him. I don't know where his arc is going to end up, but I think he's a great character. I love him.
Yeah, his relationship with his mum, like Catherine Hunter does such a great job as Edie. Like they are, whenever he comes on screen, Megan's like, oh, because she calls him Cereal Khan, because it's just upset. And when he drinks cereal fully from the bowl in either episode 5 or 6, and she's like, there he is, loving cereal again. It's just like he is a simple man. But so, what did you think about from obviously the previous few episodes? He's in a relationship with Dedra, and then we see here that he is in a relationship with Dedra. But it's like, is she purely just using him? Does she actually have feelings? Like, what did you think of Dedra and Syril, their connection, really?
It certainly feels like Dedra is just, he's a means to an end. You know, she's got a plan. She seems almost, sociopathic, doesn't she? And in terms of, okay, she knows what she wants to do. She's got a brilliant tactical mind. And Syril is this simple-minded fool who, is easily led and will just, point him in a direction and he'll go and do what you say. And I did like her face off with his mum.
Oh, I loved that.
It's just like, okay, you've got two strong female characters, and then you got this simple little Syril there. He's got no idea what this is going on. But when he disappears out the room, they have the proper grown-ups conversation.
And he's laying on the bed. I love that bit. That was improvised as well. He just he improvised laying on the bed like that. He was like, he thought, what would I do in this situation? And it's become like a meme now, and I love it. I love that so much.
No, that is good. But he does get, more so than season one, he does get the occasional jibe back. I loved when he said, that his mum's going on about, the emperor and justifying all the things that he's doing and whatever. And he says, oh, you need to stop watching Imperial News. There's a
lot. Yeah. There's so much social commentary here. And it's like, it's very, and this was all like recorded and written like a while ago. It's not like they're making this like South Park week to week. This is like legit quite a while before current global events. So it's, always predicting that.
It is a little bit, isn't it? I mean, the thing about this has been going on for years, hasn't it? And they say, the boomers in particular radicalized by the Daily Mail and
Fox News and those kind of things.
Fox News, yeah. But no, I think, like I say, I don't know quite where. I kind of want him to fall on the side of good. That's where I want him to fall. But even when, because he knows his desk is being tapped, doesn't he? Because he's got the little piece of string, so he kind of knows. But then he acts all shocked, and in front of all his group and everything, he's like doing a little tantrum. He's like, oh, we're bugging ourselves and kicking it. It's just like, he thinks he's so clever, but he's really not. So again, even though he's on the side of the Empire, I just find it all so endearing and played so well.
He's such a little man, isn't he? That's the thing. He thinks he's doing like so much, but he's so much like when Partagaz and Dedra talk in episode 6, and he's like, Partagaz says, you can't let him know the full story, which is obviously the whole thing we know from, I think, episode 1, when Krennic says, it's basically, I don't know if Dedra overtly knows of the Death Star. I don't think so, because that was very much kept under wraps. But basically, we're trying to, I think the argument was, the energy crisis. So essentially, the Empire allegedly are trying to create an energy source that makes the rest of the galaxy completely dependent on them, and then no systems that have got high levels of energy, oil, all these kind of things, they'll be useless. They'll be defunct if the Empire can create their own perfect renewable energy, essentially. So Dedra thinks, okay, well, the key to that is Ghorman. But actually what it seemingly is Ghorman, the core of it, has got the special specific metal or something, which is going to power the Death Star. That's essentially what it is. And it's like, she's playing Syril specifically to try and get him to create an uprising in the Ghormans, because he's just thinking, oh, we need to squash the Ghormans down, or we need to do something, tighten our grip on the Ghormans. But actually for Dedra, it's, we need to do that because we're trying to get something from the Ghorman. And then one step above that for Partagaz and Krennic is, we're trying to get something from the Ghorman for the Death Star. I don't even know if Partagaz knows about the Death Star, to be honest, but it's also clever and so well put together. And when you know really what's happening, it's just, what's funny is there's a comic, I can't remember which one it is. I can't remember if it's the 2020 Vader run or the 2015. I think it's the 2020 Vader run, where at some point he actually starts creating little rebel cells because the Palpatine basically tells him to. He essentially, Palpatine somewhat encourages Vader to help certain areas of the rebellion to bring them out of hiding and then crush them. And it's like kind of bring them out and that's really, it's a very clever tactic. And that's essentially what they're doing on Ghorman. And they're using that as an excuse to be able to tighten their grip on it and say to the galaxy, yeah, the Ghorman were nice people, but look at all these extremists. We had no choice. We had to do this. And in America, again, there have been protests, which I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that there have been protests in the last couple of decades where they were peaceful protests. They turned violent. And it turned out that some of the people who started the violence were actually either government or plants who are from the other side, posing as the protesters to incite violence, to then allow the police or whoever to then use violent force to squash the protest, because you can't really morally do that. So it's like, there's so many cogs going on. I'm like, Star Wars is the perfect sandbox for this kind of political commentary. It's perfect for that, because you have a fascist government. You don't have to pretend. You've literally got one there. And I just love, like, the writing of Andor it's just so good. And the Syril ISB stuff, the political maneuvering, it's like Game of Thrones-esque. And I think we loosely touched upon that in season 1, but it's got that feel of, like, and it links to the Mon Mothma stuff, which is having conversations, but it's actually the subtext between them. And I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason it feels Game of Thrones, there's two reasons I guess it feels Game of Thrones to me. One, the high production quality of it, but the dialogue, this definitely will reward, I don't have time for it right now, but will reward rewatching.
Yes.
Because I'm sure I'm missing tons of stuff as we go through. But I love those conversations. In fact, when I guess we might talk about it a bit later, but when Cassian is talking to the Ghorman lady, and they flip flop between the quiet spy talk and then yes, I'm here for materials or whatever, and it's just. I love that dynamic, but also what I love is just being in this free kind of New Hope world where you've got there's no rebel alliance yet. There's still all these different factions. They're all fighting against the Empire, but they're not strong on their own.
No.
They only become strong when they become the rebel alliance. So just seeing all of those pieces moving right now, it is so good. And I do like the fact, I mean, Syril, I guess, he does start to build trust, doesn't he, with the Ghormans. So he is sort of doing his job there. But going back to what you were saying about, the fascist government can do what they want. Well, actually, I don't think they ever can. They're always still using propaganda to justify what they need to do. So the Emperor's power grab, we saw in Revenge of the Sith. But he almost needs to keep doing that. He needs to keep putting out this propaganda on Imperial news to justify what he's doing. And I saw a documentary years ago, and I can't remember if it was the Russians or the Germans, but basically this, and I might be fact checked off about this, but in pre-Second World War, I guess around 1939, I guess you'd have some soldiers, let's say it was the Germans, dressed up as Polish soldiers, and then going across almost hop across the Polish border and then attack the German side. They're actually Germans, but they're attacking Germans in Polish soldier. And then it's like, outrage, who've got to do something about this. And then it gives them the excuse to go in and invade Poland at that point. So I think it's exactly what's happening here. It's like, let them have a few wins, and then we've got no choice. Whip up the fear, pump out the propaganda in Imperial news and whip up the fear, and then, get all the stormtroopers to come in and then tighten your grip on Ghorman.
100%. And one of the connections actually is Tony Gilroy specifically said this arc was inspired by the French Revolution. He didn't say which one, because it's been lots
clearly.
of them. So they've got like berets on or beret adjacent headwear. So the language of Gore is created. It's an original language, but it's created with French phonetics. Because when Meg and I were watching it, I was like, this sounds French. And she was like, I feel like it sounds German. The reason for that is because French phonetics, but the main gentleman, the guy who plays Cario Rylands, he is actually German, so he's got a slight German twang to it. But all the other actors, or the vast majority of actors who are playing the Ghorman revolutionaries, are French-speaking actors. So they have got French adjacent accents. They can all speak French, and then they use their French to be able to speak Gore, which is really clever. And then you've got, there's so many French revolutions. I don't know much about the French Revolution. I've seen Les Miserables, the stage production. I've not seen the movie of Russell Crowe, but I know very little about the French Revolution and the many of them. So I just found that very interesting, and that connection there, which is, going for the German angle would be quite an easy way to do it. And I think they did that in the sequels a bit with Hux, when he's like, this will be the last day of the Republic. And it's like boom, and you're like, okay. But I think with this being the French side, it's very interesting. And a lot of the aesthetic of the fashion, a lot of the architecture has been inspired by sort of French connected things, which again just shows the way when you have fantasy and stuff, you do have to have one foot in our reality and the other foot in fantasy. When you go full fantasy, you get things like, Dark Crystal, which I know a lot of people like. It can be a bit of a hard watch. You get certain fantasy. I mean, you on VHS Strikes Back, you make Chris watch a lot of fantasy stuff, and some of you watch, you go, this is just tosh. This is absolute drivel.
Gore, in fact.
Well, there you go, because the film Gore, which Chris gave a really high review for two very big reasons. But, it's one of those where, Willow is a Lucasfilm thing. I thought Willow was all right. I didn't love it, but again, it's too much into that fantasy realm. And I think when you get even some of the prequels of Star Wars, like some of the dialogue, you're like, God, this is so hammy. This is too... No one talks like that. I'm watching a human say these words. A part of my brain is going, they're still a human in today's society. So you do have to have a percentage of it in real life. And I think Tony Gilroy and all the people who are involved with the writing, the directing, the acting of it have done such a good job there, that it's just, I loved hearing about sort of the French phonetics in that language. I thought that was just so cool.
It was, and I genuinely thought it was French. And the thing is, the reason you don't know much about the French Revolution is because you didn't grow up on Allo Allo. This British sitcom, which I'm pretty sure probably wouldn't stand up that well today, but it was pretty good. And actually, I say that there's a place, National Heritage Site, not too far from me, and they had it was some sort of festival day, but it was like not celebrating all the wars, but it had loads of people reenacting different eras and of different wars and stuff. I remember the French Revolution piece to it as well. So they were very active, but I guess, I don't know, were they disorganized? They probably were. A lot of them were not military people, but, doing their best. And that's the impression you get, isn't it? They're just not very good. I mean, they're very trusting of Syril, say, and Cassian can tell because he's a hardened spy now, isn't he? He can spot them that they're probably... They should either go home. Well, they should go home, really. They're going to get caught out fairly easily.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately, I think, what is going to happen. So I'll quickly mention about the Tarkin massacre. So that was mentioned, I think it was either in episode 5 or episode 6 was mentioned. So the Ghorman massacre is going to happen. That's something that's going to happen. It's a mild spoiler, but it's known in the Star Wars universe. So sorry to listeners if you weren't aware. But, as I said to Megan, it's like, if you've seen Rebels, you already know about the Ghorman massacre to a degree. But what I say to Megan is whenever she predicts something, she goes, I think this is going to happen. And I've got a poker face. I don't want to spoil stuff, but I always say, I was like, this is Andor. Whatever, anytime there's some happiness, there's going to be the truth hammer coming down and crushing people. And it's always the same. It happened in the final episode with Cinta and Vel, which we'll get into. But the Tarkin massacre. So the bellboy, I guess he was, the hotel staff, he says to Andor, he's like, yeah, Tarkin landed a ship on 500 unarmed civilians and killed them. And I'm like, that is so soulless and so brutal. And this is right at the start. I believe this is around 18 years before the Battle of Yavin. So, because he said it was either 13 or 16 years ago. So it's only a few years after the Empire really got created. And Tarkin's landing a ship on 500 people, which is just insane. And so the Tarkin massacre actually happened in Legends originally. And it happened 18 years before the Battle of Yavin, so a year after Revenge of the Sith. And so that was classed as the Ghorman massacre in Legends. So in Legends, the Tarkin massacre and the Ghorman massacre were the same thing. In canon, they're two separate events, quite like a decade and a half apart, which is quite interesting. We're gonna see that. But I thought that was very brutal and very harrowing to hear about. And from there, we'll go into Andor. So I want to give the baton back to you. So we've got Andor's story. We'll keep Bix out just for the time being. We'll focus on Andor. How did you feel about, A, if you've got any comments on the Tarkin massacre, and B, with Andor going into the Ghorman side? Because you did touch on it a little bit there, and I want to expand.
Yeah, so I think I had to look up what the Tarkin Massacre was because I was like, oh, and it's just one of those legendary names, isn't it? You just Tarkin, a callback to him. And what a bastard, just landing on all those people. I thought he was a bastard before, but you think of the brutality of that move. It's almost different level even for him. Um, but I think Cassian's journey in this last three episodes has been interesting because he's kind of flip-flopped a bit. He's almost, in Star Wars, you've got this whole attachment issue, haven't you? With especially Force users, attachment all leads to the dark side and stuff. And you can see that he's very protective of Bix. So he's going out and he's doing these missions and everything, but it's really he doesn't want her doing the same. And even I don't think it was conclusive, but Bix had obviously they I don't know if I just missed it, but they've obviously killed some not stormtrooper, but someone from the Empire, and she's questioning, did you just kill him for me, kind of thing, and she's wondering what her own role in all of this is. And yeah, I think it's really interesting because he is trying to keep her safe, but then by the time we get to the end, you almost see she's been wrestling with not sleeping. She's been taking drugs to try and sleep and everything, all fairly traumatic. But then she gets, the guy who tortured her, and you're like, get in, and she's got that steely look about her. And so I feel like going on from here, they're going to be more in sync with each other with doing the different missions and everything. But Cassian seemed to be struggling with, again, what was his role in this? And he's okay doing the odd little mission and that, but he doesn't want to put Bix in any danger.
Yeah, it was interesting because when Jack and I spoke last week about Bix, we thought that the assault scene that was going to bring her out. That was going to be her kind of taking control again. But we were wrong. That it did not. It either, from what Andor said, it kind of gets the impression that when she's out on a mission, she's okay, but it's the quiet moments that really get her. And I think when it comes to PTSD, that's quite common. That's a very common trait for PTSD, which is just, especially people in war or people who have been through an event like Bix has, is, if you're busy, your mind's occupied. But when you're quiet by yourself, that's when people get really troubled and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that she's kind of got that closure, it seems. And it seems like, Cassian, after going off to Ghorman and saying, like, to Luthen, they're not ready. And Bix isn't ready, and this, that. And he's like, you need to make a decision. I thought you want to be part of the cause. Are you part of the cause or not? Are you with Bix? What do you want? And he's like, both. You have to help us. You got us into this. You have to help us. And, Luthen doesn't really respond. And then the next thing you kind of see with them is Luthen's little light going on, which is indicating there's a mission. And then Bix and Andor go off to kill Gorst, the torture guy. And it's like, okay, so it does seem like Luthen has recognized that. He's seen that part, and he was kind of playing with them a bit. He was testing them and this, that, and the other, because Andor points it out. And Luthen is very good at manipulating people, but it is, I think he does, I don't think he cares about people, but he cares about being on the right side of history in a way, regardless of how he does that. And I just think, again, Stellan Skarsgård, his acting is phenomenal in this, but Luthen is such a brilliantly complex character in the Rebellion, because I think before Andor, we had Saw Gerrera was the closest we had, because we had people like Mon Mothma prior to Andor, who is this angelic looking figure. You've got people like Leia, who are very, we're doing this, we're doing that, straight to it, but very moral. You get Luke, who's naive about it, and then you get Saw Gerrera, who's very much like, I will kill civilians to kill the Empire. And you're like, that wasn't the whole spectrum. And Luthen kind of fits in there, right between sort of the middle to Saw. And he's like, I don't think he'd bomb civilians to kill the Empire, but he would let civilians die maybe to do some huge damage to the Empire if needs be. And I think his character, intertwined with Bix's struggle, really bolsters up those two characters, as well as Andor's human side a lot.
I think, I don't know if for Luthen it's about being on the right side of history, but he is absolutely clear that the cause is the most important thing.
100%.
So, he tries to keep people separated because he thinks, well, we all need to put the cause above our own personal situation. And I think with him and Saw Gerrera as well, they're similar in that respect where they don't see that there's an end. There's no happy ending for them. It's all about the cause, and they've got a role to play in it. But probably the happy ending comes after they've departed from the world. So I think that's really interesting as well. It's almost it makes me think back to V for Vendetta. You
Mm.
know, V didn't have he didn't come with here's how we fix everything. He was more of an anarchist. He was like, this needs tearing down, and because of all the problems with it. And I think Luthen and Saw Gerrera, although they're on the different end of being extreme, Luthen definitely more strategist. But yeah, they definitely almost to a religious level, they just believe in the cause.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting there, and I liked, I thought Andor going under for Ghorman was interesting. His sort of persona, and they kind of almost jovial about who are you this time? I was Valerian Sky, and that kind of, and he looked very good. Like, I mean, Diego Luna's a good-looking chap anyway, but when he did fully look good, I was like, God, you do scrub up well, good sir.
Yeah.
But like, let's talk a little bit more about the Ghorman side, because. So we've got, as you said, they're young revolutionaries. They're very much fresh face in a way. And, Andor kind of goes in, he's like, they're not ready. And Luthen's pretty mad about that. He's like, look, if Ghorman go up, it'll burn. And Luthen says, they'll burn bright. And it's like, ooh, that's revolutionary talk. Yeah, it's harsh, but it's realistic. And he's like, Luthen is one of those people where he's like, he is right pretty much all the time, which makes it so difficult because you're like, God, you're kind of soulless, but you're completely right here. This is the right decision. So how did you feel about the whole storyline of Ghorman, from the Ghorman kind of side, and those revolutionaries, which obviously eventually links to Vel and Cinta?
Well, I couldn't remember if we have had any mention of Gore at all in the previous versions. You say the Ghorman massacre was mentioned before, but you know me and like these place names and stuff. It just goes in one ear out the other. But yeah, again, it all felt very French Revolution. It felt very much like the Second World War. And like I say, I only know that mainly because of Hello, Hello. But knowing that it sounds to us French, but it isn't actually French, it reminds me, did you ever hear? I've seen it on a few adverts recently, but there was an Italian guy in the sort of, it was the 50s or 60s, and he was a musician, and he got really annoyed because he was like, the kids will just listen to any American music.
I think I know what you're going to say.
So he made like a rock and roll song, which sounds to an Italian ear like English, but it's absolute gibberish. But it's a really catchy song.
Yeah, I think I have. I remember seeing a couple of reels about it or something. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So I kind of found that interesting with the Gormans being almost like pseudo French, but even the feel of the whole place, the arcs, the shape of the architecture and everything. You got these little tight streets. You've got almost people going around on these Vespers and stuff. It just feels so French. And actually, going back a little bit to Cassian, like you say, scrubs up incredibly well as this, like, what was he, a textile dealer or
Fashion designer or something. Yeah.
something like that, wasn't it? Because they with the spiders and everything, that's basically the main industry they've got, isn't it? The textiles, I guess. But again, what I love about Andor is those quiet moments, those dialogue heavy discussions. And so, mentioned about the Tarkin massacre, but as like a history book factual thing, there's this thing that Tarkin did, and, all these people were killed. But when he's talking to the bellhop and he's actually saying, he was there, it was a really kind of close personal moment. And I don't know, when you tell it in that first person, it just has so much more power. And so I really enjoyed that particular scene. But like I mentioned it before, when they're at the cafe and they're switching between the quiet spy voices and then the ha ha ha, yes, I'd love to see these silks or whatever. So yeah, I thought it was great. I loved the whole gore thing. I didn't fully get. I think I need to watch it again with the art. and obviously they were trying to remove the bug, weren't they? And this, that, and the other. So I think there's a lot more that I'd like to explore and go back and understand a bit more about Gore. But yeah, like I say, to me, it was almost like pseudo French.
Yeah, no, completely. And so we'll wrap up this Gore stuff with Vel and Cinta. So obviously you met them in the Heist arc of season 1. And they did pop up a little bit in the prior arc, at the wedding of the first few episodes, where I really loved. I loved that weddingy stuff. How did you feel about that? Because also we get, we knew they were lovers because of their interactions in the Heist arc, but then we got as a full-on physical intimacy moment there again, which shows that Andor, from the assault scene in the prior couple of episodes and with that scene as well, it's very much like, and I mean, even also Bix doing essentially drugs, taking probably the equivalent of a sleeping pill or maybe some like cannabis or something, I don't know, but like this show is clearly more mature. It's meant for adults, or at least an older audience in a sense. But how did you feel about Vel and Cinta, Cinta being shot and killed? How do you feel about that in a sense? And did you see it coming at all? Because Megan was like, one of them's going to die. As soon as they were happy, she was like, they're happy, one of them's going to die. Did you feel that?
I'm with Megan. I was like, oh, we found each other again. Isn't this great? It's like, you're on Andor, mate. This is, I don't know what's going to happen, but it ain't going to end up well. So yeah, it was a shame. Again, it told us like about Luthen's character as well, because it was them who was talking about, he wants to keep everyone separate and focused on the cause. But yeah, as soon as they kind of had that happy moment, and it's like, oh, this is great, isn't it? We'll just do this mission, and we'll live happily ever after. You're like, yeah, and the thing is, what I loved about how she got killed off, which sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I mean, the almost like poetry of it, the fact that it is so stupidly senseless. Like the little fight, they told everyone else, no one else has guns. This is not their first rodeo. They've done this before. We need to, reduce the risk of friendly fire and all that sort of stuff. So we're the only ones who will be armed. And then the young guy, disobeys that. And it's actually with a wrestle with another guy who hates the Empire as well, but he doesn't know what's going on. And then they're just having a bit of a tussle, and that's them fighting against each other. And then someone, a skilled warrior ending up getting killed in a massively senseless way. So that's why I thought it was a good smaller story, if you like, for the wider problem with the all the different factions, all the different cells not working with each other and just not really being effective.
And I think I only just made this connection now of what you said there. I think what it is it connects again with the previous arc when Andor crashes on or lands on Yavin 4, and he meets those group of rebels who were squabbling over nothing. And they all basically kill each other. And it's what I said in the prior episode, which was like the whole thing of the rebellion, almost the reason it didn't kind of come together till sort of A New Hope, or Rogue One, which was, Andor and Jyn disobeying orders, was that the problem with the rebellion at a point is that so much of it gets into infighting and squabbling to a degree and not listening to each other. And I think by the time you get to the original trilogy, it's kind of like, we've been struggling and failing together kind of for 4 or 5 years and getting in each other's way and disagreeing on the tactics and being too careful here and not careful enough here, blah, blah, blah. And I think by the time you get to the original trilogy, it's like, right, the Rebel Alliance, for the most part, knows what they're doing. They are organized. They've got their leaders. Everyone who's left kind of knows you have to follow orders. You have to do what Akbar tells you. You have to do what Leia tells you. You have to do these things. And if you don't, things get messed up, Which really is what happens with Luke and Empire Strikes Back, looking back kind of like retroactively, to be honest. But yeah, it is like poetry, as you say, and it's very sad, but like Cinta dying was such an unnecessary death. And it's as soon as she's killed, that guy, as you said, who was at the meetings, who was very anti-Empire, as soon as he realized what happened, he's like, I'll pick her up. I'll carry her up. Yeah. And that boy, like, he is a child. And because he thought he knew better when he didn't. He got his gun out when you shouldn't. It should be a last resort. And because of his foolishness and his stupidity, a great member of the Rebel Alliance and a human being was killed because of that. And I really like when Vel is telling him off in the transport on the way back, because, if it was me, and he had killed my partner, my lover, anything like that, it would be very difficult for me not to just beat the fuck out of him. But obviously she's so conditioned in the fight. She's been in the fight for several years, if not more. She's very controlled. Her rage is controlled. So when she speaks to him, rather than what I would do, even if I didn't try and knock him out, I would just say loads of horrible, horrible stuff of like, you're a piece of shit and I hate you. Look what you've done. She doesn't do that in that way. She gets at him in such an articulate and beautifully said way that it's still got very much the venom in it. And it's so strong, it's so powerful of just being like, you are going to wear this like a skin. This is going to be with you forever. Your stupid act has ruined someone's life, has destroyed them, and you have to live with that. And you have to spend the rest of your life making up for that. And you're like, God, that's some powerful writing and a great performance as well.
It was really well delivered, wasn't it? And like you say, I mean, it's hard to say what you would actually do, isn't it? But you'd be tempted to take a blaster out yourself in this kind of world. But
100%.
yeah, I mean, like you say, is in that moment, is she focused on, let's see if some good can come out of this? Because, you have to understand, you might be, borderline a child, but, you've just killed someone. So you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to make up for this thing. And, it'll never leave you now until the day you die. This will be with you forever. So yeah, they could have taken an easy way out. Of course, while they're doing that whole heist, old Syril's watching there, isn't he? Like, oh yeah, I'm on the inside track here. So yeah, no, but really, really powerful scene.
Well, let's go on to, so there's two more sort of primary aspects here. So you've got the Mon Mothma stuff, you've got the Saw stuff. So I want to get into Saw Gerrera's storyline because he isn't in the third episode. His story is really, he's not actually on screen that much, but I just think he has got so much gravitas to him. He is such a character. There's so much to Saw Gerrera. I mean, in a very brief history of Saw Gerrera, he starts off as just a random character in Clone Wars on Onderon, which Onderon gets mentioned in Andor. His sister Steela gets killed in a fight against the Separatists, and Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano essentially help train up these insurgents to take over the government that is siding with the Separatists. So that's how they do it. And what happens is that he gets trained by Darth Vader, basically, which is quite crazy. And then he pops up again in the Bad Batch very briefly. And then after that, it's a bit quiet. But he's still doing loads of stuff behind the scenes. He pops up in the Jedi Fallen Order game, which is a few years after that. He's in, in a couple of the novels like Rebel Rising. I think he pops up in a Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear book. Like, he's always doing stuff in the background once the Empire takes over. He never trusts the Empire. But then after Fallen Order, he's then obviously in Rogue One as well. He pops up in Rebels for a few episodes. He's in 4 episodes of Rebels, where we see him in like a year or two difference. But all of his Rebels appearances are after this. So... And what I love about it is in Clone Wars and Bad Batch, it is voiced by one gentleman whose name escapes me. But outside of that, it's all Forrest Whitaker. And he really likes the character. He voices him in Fallen Order. He voices him in Rebels, obviously in Rogue One, and also in this. And he loves the character. And you can see his acting. He's so into it. And the character and his cadences is so well done. And he delivers some of my favourite dialogue in this. It's incredible. But I want to ask you what you thought of Saw before I kind of just continuously say how much I love him and some of his dialogue. How did you feel about him, and obviously Will Mon as well, who's from the prior arc and from the finale of Andor as well, season 1? How did you feel about Saw scenes? Did they have the same weight to you as they did for me, or what do you think?
No, definitely. It felt like you say, with the gravitas, when he turns up, it's like, oh, the big boys are in now. He is one of those key players in that New Hope world, isn't he? In the Rebel Alliance. And I still don't know the guy, who Wilmon was training up. I don't know. Was he a traitor? Or is Saw just off his fucking rocker? I don't actually know. Because he was like, see, and here's the proof. Really? What was it? So honestly, I don't know. But I kind of watched the scene play out, and I'm like, was it just in that moment that Saw just thought, which one am I going to kill? Like, well, probably going to kill him because, I've got more chance with this guy. It could have been. But what I loved, I thought all of the Saw scenes were really good. Like you say, Forrest Whitaker just brings that gravitas. Um, but is it Rhydonium? The
Rhydonium, yeah.
Rhydonium, when he gives a precursor, doesn't he, about how it can basically turn your insides out and it would basically boil you from the inside, and then he sort of releases a bit, and he's like just giving it a big old sniff there, and he's like, and he calls it his sister as well, which was an interesting callback to the Clone Wars. And yeah, and then convinces Wilmon to have a bit of a sniff at it as well. It's like, what is going on here? They like sniffing cyanide
It was very
or something
unhinged,
like
wasn't it?
that. Yeah. But I loved his whole monologue really about, that revolution isn't for the sane or whatever
Yes.
it was he
That was it.
said. And it's like, yeah, yeah. So unusual for me to recount it perfectly. But so yeah, every scene just absolutely brilliant. And he's one of the elder statesmen for me of this whole Rogue One universe, if you like. So all of the different, the prequels, the sequels, the original trilogy, all of that. For me, you've got this little pocket now, which is almost like the Rogue One bubble. So you got Rogue One and Andor season 1 and 2, Rebels, of course. And I think this might be my favorite era.
Mm.
Not, I don't mean in terms of the movie making and whatever, but just everything. It's almost like because it gets shit before the sequels as well. It's like, oh yeah, we killed the Nazis. Oh fucking hell, they're back and they're bigger. They don't just have a Death Star; they've got a Death Planet. For fuck's sake. So, but this pre-New Hope era is where it's at its darkest, and all of these factions, they're not all working together, and you can see that it's all coming together for something special. And so I don't think I've really hit that realization before watching these episodes. But yeah, it's definitely turning into one of my favorite eras in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's interesting because I prequels I love. High Republic's one of my favorite, but yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you because it's having to fight a war. It's a cold war, really, but it's almost like a shadow war because it's like they're having to fight the Empire without the Empire almost realizing how much they're doing or trying to. And the ISB are now catching on. The ISB with Partagaz and Dedra and stuff, they're figuring this out and they're like, okay. And obviously Palps probably knows it anyway. But the wider Empire has not acknowledged that there is a rebel uprising. The announcement after the heist in season 1, that was kind of like the first public knowledge that people are fighting against the Empire. Prior to that, no one knew. It was all these little trickly pieces that Dedra and Part put together. She's like, it's too random to be not random. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's so random that it's perfectly spaced apart randomness that's actually too much so. So clearly there's something going on here. Why is it these specific parts are all being taken at this point? And it's like, I really like this era as well. I mean, obviously everyone knows Rebels is my favourite piece of Star Wars content in existence. And so I think that probably a lot of these elements of things that I like about that, which is, Star Wars Rebels, a lot of it is on Lothal, which is like a planet no one cares about. So when all this stuff is happening, you've just got a couple of incompetent Imperial officers who can't get their crap together. And the Ghost crew are kind of utilising that. But by the time you get to season 3 and season 4, and they're connected to the bigger rebellion, and obviously Mon Mothma comes into it, Saw Gerrera comes into it, and those kind of things, then some of those episodes have such weight to them, and Thrawn, etc. And yeah, it's a really interesting era of Cold War politics almost. But Cold War is two big nation states fighting against each other quietly. But this is an empire kind of squashing little rebellions without trying to acknowledge they're doing it. It is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
It is an oppressive, totalitarian government, isn't it? And you're going to get these little occasional uprisings. You go back to the Roman Empire; they'd have these flare-ups. The barbarians, say in Germany, and the Celts in Britain, and and they just send over all the Centurions and squash them, essentially. So I think with any oppressive regime like that, you're always going to get these little flare-ups. But while they're all acting separately, it's all good. I mean, clearly, even in New Hope, what is it? Tarkin says something like, "Fear will keep the local systems in place." So it is that ruling through fear, through the propaganda. But it is this consistent, we see through history that people acting on their own have no real power. They're not going to influence anything. And this is where Luthen is the master strategist, really.
Yes.
He sees it that, they aren't going to win separately. It's only together that they'll have a chance.
Yeah, you have to put your personal feelings aside. And it links in with what you said sort of earlier, and it links to what Luthen said to Andor about him a bit, because it's like, Vel and Cinta, they said, Luthen wants us separate. He thinks we're more valuable separate than together. And it's like, on a human level, that's morally wrong. On a strategist level, that's completely correct, because you're both, Vel and Cinta are incredibly efficient, clever individuals who have both been involved in some great stuff. And I think that with Saw, he's such an extremist and he's off his rocker, as you said, but like linking to what he said, like the Rhydonium stuff is, Rhydonium is this fuel. It's in Star Wars Rebels, once again. It's not in the Saw Gerrera episodes, oddly enough, as far as I could tell, but it is in a couple of episodes where, Hera and Sabine, at one point, they get stuck on this like planet, and there's these monsters trying to get them. There's these big the big red barrels. That's Rhydonium.
Yeah,
so it's just a type of starship fuel that's just really volatile. I think it like is more efficient. I think it's like super fuel, but it is very volatile. It's very hard to move around. You can't knock canisters. Most people don't want it on their ships because it's like if you get a hit and one canister falls over, you can blow the whole ship up. And then what they're doing essentially, the machines, is siphoning off Rhydonium. So it's like, and it's so hard to do because it so wants to explode, as Saw says. It's so volatile. People don't really steal Rhydonium off people because it's so hard to do and it's so likely you're going to get killed. So that's kind of a little explanation there. But one thing that Saw says, which I really like, one part is the sane people. Revolution is not for the sane, which is a really interesting thing, but it's very poignant. Another thing he says was that we'll all be dead before the Republic is back. And Luthen says that in his speech in the previous season. Both Saw and Luthen, who, as you say, they're the two frontline rebellious leaders. I say Bail Organa and Mon Mothma are the two political rebellion leaders, but Saw Gerrera and Luthen Rael are the two frontlines. And it's very unlikely. Saw we know doesn't survive because he dies in Rogue One, but I suspect Luthen Rael's going to die in the final episode. That's kind of going to be his thing. And it's like they're both already acknowledging years before the Battle of Yavin, like this point is 3 years before, and with Luthen's case, I think it was 4 or 5 years before, both acknowledging the fact they're not going to live to see the Republic. They're not going to live for this new era they're fighting for, and they're fine with it. And you have to be so in it for the cause. You cannot be in it for anything else to really be so content with the fact that you're going to die, and not I'm going to die as a martyr. I'm not going to just die for one action. Just that I'm spending my entire life and all my energy and all my money and all my efforts doing everything I can to just put some steps forward to hopefully get to this conclusion. And that Saw acknowledges it too. It really makes his death in Rogue One even more weighted, because you're like, when he dies, he's like, I'm ready. This is my time to go. You're kind of like, oh, it makes more sense. He's been fighting his whole life, and he's probably clicking. We're in the final steps of the pre-rebellion, and we're actually entering the full-on war, which are two very, very different scenarios. So again, absolutely loved that part. I thought it was really, really cool.
And I'd always assumed when we meet him in Rogue One, he's like on oxygen or something. But now I'm wondering, is it a bit of Rhydonium?
It could be, yeah. What is he huffing?
Yeah, because I mean, when we met him in Clone Wars, I mean, he just spoke normally. He didn't have this strange voice. Is that just all the Rhydonium that he's just been snuffing?
It certainly could be. It certainly could be. Yeah, I mean, I want to quickly another bit. Here's a bit of lore dump for us. So, Dakar. Dakar is the place that Saw is in this before when Wilmon goes there initially, and that's where I think Pluti is the guy's name, who may or may not be an Imperial. When they're there, Did you recognise the place of Dakar at all?
Uh, Princess Leia was there in the sequels, wasn't she? It was one of
Yes.
the places where they went.
Yeah, The Force Awakens. That's where the
Yeah,
Resistance
yeah.
base is. So the Resistance base, where Saw Gerrera was, that's where the Resistance base is for pretty much all of Force Awakens, and that's where they leave right at the start of The Last Jedi. So when I saw Dakar, I was like, I'm pretty certain that's from The Force Awakens. So I checked it and I was correct. So I really like that little connection there. And a fun little additional part there is that what you find is in the sequel trilogy, and this isn't really shown that much, which quite frustrates me, but in the sequel trilogy, a lot of the places that the Resistance go to are places that the Rebellion had that the Empire never really found or forgot about. So Dakar is one of them, but also Crate, which is got one of my favourite scenes in the sequel trilogy, which is the end of The Last Jedi. We've got the Salt Flats, and you've got all that. It's the final sort of battle where Kylo goes against like the hologram of the Force projection of Luke. Crate, there's a comic about it, which I believe is Storms of Crate, where Leia and Luke, somewhere between, I believe it's between A New Hope and Empire, they're searching for a new base, and then they go to Crate, and they start setting up and stuff, but then I think that the Empire kind of find them, or that there's something else comes up, and they have to leave it, which is why Leia in The Last Jedi knows that, oh, there's a place in Crate we can hide, because the Empire never really found us there, and we kind of left a few supplies there. So Crate was a place from the Rebellion to the sequel trilogy. Dakar is a place from the Rebellion to the sequel trilogy. I like those threads. I think they're really interesting, and I think they kind of... The big issue with the sequel trilogy, in my opinion, a lot of it is it's so similar to the originals, whereas the prequel trilogy was so different, so different. And there's, all the ships are the same. There's not really much difference in this or that. It's very similar. And we were kind of thinking it's been 30 years. We thought the technology would have improved a lot more and stuff. Things changed more in the 20 years between prequels and the originals than in the 30 years between the originals and the sequels. It doesn't usually make a lot of sense. But what I do like is, now that we're post the movies, we've got all of these clever writers, be it in comics or books or shows like Andor, where they're going, okay, how can we connect the sequel trilogy to the prequels and the originals in an organic way that feels lived in, that's actually kind of rewarding for the fans as well, without it seeming cameo-ish or cheesy. And that's one of the elements I really, really like. It is just those kind of repeated things. And it's also, it feeds into the idea that history repeats itself, which is one of the things that, I think Saw might say it at one point at some point, but I know that Luke kind of says it at some point. I think Thrawn says it, which is that whole thing of where the galaxy's in the cycle, where it's Republic gets formed and then it gets taken over. There's normally an empire of some sort, and then that gets toppled, and then and in Legends continuity that does happen. There's loads of empires, there's loads of Sith empires and things like that, and there's lots of different republics. But history does repeat itself, unfortunately. That's a saying outside of your Star Wars, so that's a saying within it. So that was a nice little lore dumpy thing that I really appreciated there. Before we get onto Mon and that kind of stuff, is there anything else you want to mention about Saw or any other elements?
No, just reflecting on what you were saying there about the through line from where we are now, the pre-New Hope, if you like, supposed prequels into the original trilogy and the sequels. I think I speculated a while ago, and who knows, Mike, which of the hundreds of hours of podcasts that we've done on Star Wars, somewhere there, I speculated that I hope what they're able to do is justify the sequels. I mean, Force Awakens, I loved, but basically it was a remake of A New Hope.
Yeah.
So was Top Gun Maverick as well, by the way. So, they're not on their own there. And then, they tried some different things, but it got a bit wacky. Then they tried to rein it in. And at some point, I know we've talked about this. I will go back and watch Rise of Skywalker. Still only watched it that once, but just massive fail for me. It was supposed to be the culmination of everything. And they just made a mockery of the previous 8 episodes for me. So, but I am hopeful because ultimately Clone Wars made the prequels better.
Yep.
So I think adding in that texture around, I'm pretty sure they can, with the right writers on there, I'm pretty sure they can do that and just make them better and make things make sense. And the thing I'm also impressed, I would say, about the whole season here is there is so much lore.
Yeah.
Now, I thought, when you watch Mandalorian, it's so clearly made by Star Wars fans. You got Filoni and Favreau there, and they just love it, and they love putting in like these little callbacks and everything, and it's so obviously made by fans. Whereas this is just made by skilled writers. However, it's so grounded. And again, I know the thing with Legends, a lot of people still upset about that, but for me, it did make sense. And I like the way it's kind of, it's not writing off all of Legends. It's saying, well, might have happened, might not have happened. And things like the Tarkin massacre, it's like, oh yeah, that was a Legends thing. It's now canon as well. So
100%.
yeah, I think it's season's firing on all cylinders for me.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's really interesting. There's so much really to delve into. It's a shame in certain respects that they did choose to, because it wasn't totally Tony Gilroy's decision. It's a shame that Disney were like, we need to release 3 episodes a week.
That is the one thing, and that's an editorial commercial thing, obviously. But the one criticism is I think we'd have enjoyed it more just digesting 1 episode a week. I mean, I could always space them out if I wanted to, like even before coming on here, for the first 3, I could have spaced it out. No, as soon as one finishes, I'm on to the next one. So, own worst enemy. But I do think it would have been better. They'd have had so much more discussion if they'd have released them one at a time.
Yeah, or I said with Jack, it was like, for me, what could I make in the middle is release 2 episodes, then the third, and then 2 episodes, then the third, and then you'd still have 8 weeks or so, I think, of it. But I think it's just, I don't know, it's a Disney metric. They were probably like, with Andor, it was too slow, maybe. We're doing it in 3-episode arcs. Obviously, I think a lot of it is because we've got Thunderbolts coming out, and also with Fantastic Four, and these kind of things. It's like there's only a finite amount of content people consume now, and they learned that lesson from the Disney Plus days, which was post-COVID. They were like, here's a Disney Plus show every single week for like 2 years. And if you include Star Wars, Star Wars and Marvel is basically that. And I think they're now trying to go, okay, we need to do this more tactfully, which, again, I'm not as much of a fan of, but yeah, we don't have to watch it all like this. But unfortunately, all my algorithms on social media kind of mean I can't even look on social media until after I've seen all of Andor, because everyone's talking about it all.
I can't even remember what I was looking at. And I saw a picture of Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera.
Yeah.
But it was literally on the morning that the episodes dropped. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I watched them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, sometimes on Disney Plus they do it. Like on the thumbnail for the last episode, the thumbnail of it was Bix with Gorse, the guy who tortured her. The thumbnail of that, not the little picture, but like the big picture that comes up when you click on it, was her with him with a gag on. And I'm like,
right.
But that's the last 2 minutes of the whole episode.
Yeah.
So the whole episode, I was like, well, I know this is going to happen at some point. It was the last 2 minutes. I was like, what? Why would you do that? Like,
it's bizarre.
Disney do that. They did it with Daredevil Born Again. There was like a screenshot that's come up that's like of one of the last scenes in the last episode. And I'm like, why would you do that, Disney?
Yeah.
But, so there was something else I was going to mention, but I've completely forgotten what it was. I was trying to remember.
You were talking about Mon Mothma?
Well, we're going to go into that, but there was something else I was trying to remember about Saw Gerrera, I think, or something along those lines, but I can't remember. Maybe it'll come back and I'll delve back in. But yes, I think Mon Mothma is the last kind of touchstone we'll get to here, and then we'll start to wrap up. So we've got Mon. So she's in. She's not in the second episode, if memory serves. Oddly enough, that gets given to Saw, but she's in the first and the last episode. So I might be wrong here, but I feel like episode 5 in this is the only episode of Andor she's not in. I might be wrong because she might not have been in all the episodes of season 1, but I feel like she was. So we've got the first episode of this collection. Mon's only in a little bit where she's losing people and their votes, and people want to vote against the PORD, which I forgot to look up what that was, so I'll look up that in a moment. But then you've got in this episode 6, What a Festive Evening, she's got a lot more screen time. So her and Perrin, they go off to lots of these summer banquet-y things, the initiative banquet things. She sees the Oath Keeper in the Republic Senate, which is really interesting. I don't think I've seen that before, which is forcing all the senators to like pledge an allegiance to the Empire, which was very interesting. And then you've got Bail Organa pops up, who's been recast into Benjamin Bratt instead of Jimmy Smits. The reason for that, fans, is because they just couldn't get Jimmy Smit to come on because of scheduling. He already had stuff planned. They tried their darndest, according to Tony Gilroy, but they just couldn't line it up, and he couldn't come out of the commitments he already had, so they just couldn't make it work, which is, things like that happen. Really happy they didn't do a deep fake and try and do that stuff. Just do a little recast. It made sense. It didn't bring me out of it. It's fine. So Benjamin Bratt, he was the, they just kind of popped him in there almost to go, we're recasting him. He's going to have a bigger role probably in the next couple episodes, but here he was. But then we get into the party. So there's the two parts of the party. There's the networking part of the party. And then there's also the whole little storyline with Clea and Luthen and the listening device with Davo Squadron and the artifacts. And obviously Krennic and stuff. So what did you think about all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, Mon Mothma, we know where she ends up.
Yeah.
So there's a taking away of the peril a little bit. But I do feel like, I mean, I loved her little rave in the third episode. I thought that was amazing. Just really like, fuck this, and just I'm going to have a great time because just sent my childhood friend off to be murdered and whatever. Just all these bad things, and just how many times have we thought just, oh, fuck this, I'm just going to dance away.
Yeah, or in like a complete spiral of just being like, I'm terrified what to do. This is, what do I even do with myself now? I have to get mullered. But you saying that reminded me, the thing I was going to mention, with Vel and Cinta, when Cinta says to Vel in their conversation in the cafe, she says, I was in an accident, I was recovering. I think that was her crashing the vehicle that Tay was in. They haven't said it yet. I wonder if they're ever going to. But with the assumption is when Cinta took him away after the wedding thing, that Luthen basically said to her, you need to kill him. And assumedly, she crashed the vehicle they're in, killing him. She was severely injured, and she's only just got out of it. That's a thought of mine. That's what I think it could be. But that was a little. I was like, oh, that's it. They haven't. Is that maybe? Are we going to find out? Who knows? But I liked that part.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to figure out what the time jump was. I was thinking, is it that long ago that happened? I
1 year.
Couldn't quite. Yeah. Okay, I missed that. But yeah, Mon, I think she's playing a dangerous game because she's clearly opposing. She's trying to rally, people to her cause, but she's not really having a lot of success with it. And then even when they go to the little museum thing, where looking at all the different artifacts, she's very vocally against the Empire, and she's not really taken very seriously, which is maybe a saving grace. But I just felt like she is playing a dangerous game there. But like I say, I know where it ends up in A New Hope. So, it's not, I know she's going to come out of it all right. But in that moment, I felt like, oof, you're showing your hand a little bit too much there.
Yeah, you can even see some of the people around her looking, and there's a little tiny moment where Perrin, right after she's had the kind of the back and forth with Krennic, and then it goes on to the tension with Clea and Donnie after they've kind of managed to get the thing out. There's a bit where when Mon and Perrin are walking up to the big circle dish thing, he pushes her hand and he says something to her that you can't hear, and he kind of pulls her back a smidge and just says, just for a second, and it's probably like, he's up a bit. Because like Krennic is like, he's very high up in the Empire. Realistically, you've got, Palpatine, then you've got Vader and Tarkin, then under that you've got Krennic and Thrawn. Like, they're the top 5 really, until they probably retcon and add someone else in there, but they are the top 5 people in the Empire. Krennic is like the leader of the Death Star stuff, so it's like, as you say, she's cutting it very fine. And like overtly being like, it was a massacre, and he was like, well, it was this, and she's like, well, it's this, and he's like, yeah, you saying rebel, I'm saying terrorist, and it's like, ooh, that's kind of close.
That was the moment where I was like, ooh, and at some point she's going to have to go fully in with the Rebel Alliance, isn't she? And I just wonder how close we are to that now.
I would say, minor spoiler, it's going to be next week.
Right.
That's, from the timeline and from Rebels and from everything else, it's next week I'm very, very excited for. It's probably going to be absolutely horrendous for all of us to witness. We are going to be going back to Ghorman, I can assure you that much. But there's going to be a lot of Mon, because I think that, you know, this episode was about sort of the emancipation of Bix, and then Andor and his relationship with Bix, showing they actually did get some clarity and some time together. You've got Wilmon being... I can't think of the term, but he's being kind of like wrapped into the extremists of the partisans. So he's radicalized. There we go. That's the word. So he's being radicalized. You've got Luthen and Clea being like, things are not quite falling apart, but they've got so many threads going on. There's so many rebel cells now. It's hard to actually keep track. You've got Mon, who's losing any clout in the Imperial Senate, as well as having to like do the oath and stuff to the Empire. So and the ISB are now starting to twig on to the rebels and like more factions of it. So you've got all these episodes they are leading into Rogue One in their own ways, but it's like, as you say, Mon Mothma in Rogue One is in the Rebel Alliance. The Rebel Alliance is a thing. So is Bail Organa. They're both there. They're no longer in the Senate. And obviously by A New Hope, one of the first bits of dialogue we get is Tarkin confirming Palpatine has disbanded the Senate. So we know by, you know, 0 BBY, 0 years before the Battle of Yavin, because just before the Battle of Yavin, which is the Death Star blowing up, at that point, the Senate's disbanded. This is 3 years before that. And a big thing is going to happen next week, which is going to be the following year. So only 2 years before A New Hope, something major is going to happen. And the Ghorman stuff is building to something. Mon is building up to something. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on there. And I am very excited. But I want to say there's a couple little bits, and then we'll wrap up with a couple little bits of Mon. But a few things here. So one thing I saw, I think the first episode, was actually there's some Aki that we saw. So there are a species who actually we saw first in The Rise of Skywalker. They are from the Pasana planet, and they're the ones who are like kind of dancing and stuff like that, and Rey talks to them and things. So that's quite cool. We've seen them more and more since The Rise of Skywalker popping up on screen. They're just a cool creature. They've got like a long sort of trunk things, but they've got two of them that kind of curl out that I quite like. So you've got that. You've also got Mon. She, obviously, as I said, she pops up in Rebels, but she's also got someone who, I'm going to have to look at my notes specifically here, because I've written it so small and I can't remember his name exactly, but a gentleman called Erskine Samaj. So he was in the wedding episode prior, and he's there and he speaks to Luthen, and Luthen goes, "Oh, is it, you know, it's a great wedding." And the guy goes, "I've never been to a wedding before, because actually my dad was from Naboo and my mother was from here."
Yes.
He's in Rebels. He joins, he's in 4 episodes of Rebels. Mon Mothma's in 5 episodes of Rebels. He is there in one of the finale episodes on Lothal. Like, he's either on Lothal or he's with Ezra and stuff. He interacts with Ezra. So I'm like, oh God, if we get Ezra Bridger in this, I'll be so happy. But that would be my one cameo that I would love to see, as any member of the Ghost crew. I mean, love that. But so I didn't recognise that. I actually saw someone on Threads mention it last week. And so I was like, oh, I'll make a note of that and look into it a bit more. And then you've also got, she does speak to another senator who is a Tarsunt. And there is a Tarsunt's leader called Laneva Villachan. And he's actually the Chancellor of the New Republic. And we see him get killed in The Force Awakens when the Starkiller base blows up Hosnian Prime. So I don't know if it's the same character, because, you know, the sequel trilogy is, you know, 30 odd years or 35 years or so difference. But it wouldn't surprise me if the senator, who is a Tarsunt species, he may become the Chancellor of the New Republic at that point. It might not be. I couldn't find any specific if anyone else made that link, but I just quite liked that. So there's just a couple of things. There's loads of other aliens that we saw in the background of stuff that were quite cool and interesting, but those were two that that popped up to me quite a lot. But I liked the party. I thought it was interesting. I liked that droid machine that was taking photos of them when they walk in, and it's like a big circly thing, and it's loads and loads of photos. I liked that, and I really enjoy of Andor. One of my favourite parts is, because I do like the stories of Andor, but because of my, I'm going to sound like a bit of a dick here, because of my vast Star Wars knowledge, because I know so much of what's kind of already coming, what I'm really enjoying is seeing so much of the things we don't get to see in other Star Wars stuff. Frontline battles, we see a bit of that with Saw Gerrera, we see it in Jedi Fallen Order, we see it in Jedi Survivor, we see it in Star Wars Rebels, we see it in a lot of the comics. We do not see the elite having parties and politically navigating and talking about these things, like the subtext of what they're saying. And it's something I'm probably going to say every week, because it's one of my favorite elements that I don't you don't get to see that in any real in Star Wars, apart from maybe the odd tiny panel in a comic here and there. But having the ISB agents, like having a drink and just being normal people talking about stuff.
Yeah.
And then having Luthen and Mon trying to talk about like, oh, what's going on with my cousin? I hope she's okay, without out loud being able to say these things. And then, as you point out, that culminating into when they're in that room with all of Davo Scoldren's artifacts, and Krennic and Mon having that heated debate. All of those things mixed with like the tension with Claire and the key and her squeezing and the blood dripping down. Like, it's so brilliant that a show like this can really heighten the tension when in scenes that you wouldn't expect it. You know, you'd think that when you pitch the idea of Andor to someone, you'd go, oh, it's the rebels fighting the Empire. Well, the tense scenes are going to be a rebel about to be killed by a stormtrooper, which in this season, there hasn't been that. The tense scenes have really been the other stuff. And that's one of the elements of Andor that I really like. I don't know if you had any more comments on that or any final sort of parts of these episodes.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about the characters. It's about that, dare I say, human or humanoid type story. Like I say, we heard about the Tarka massacre, you know, in a almost history book style and a history book fashion, and a lot of the big Disney stuff, it's about the special effects, it's about these amazing set pieces that happen. But you know, when you have someone describing the Tarka massacre in the first person, it just lands in a completely different way. When you see Bix really struggling with, you know, she's got a freedom because she's not in prison by the Empire, but she's kind of imprisoned within, you know, Coruscant, isn't she? You know, it's a very Blade Runner Coruscant, you know, all very black, raining outside, and she's just utterly miserable. She feels trapped and in a prison, and she just wants to go out to the park or something. And Cassian's saying, oh, they put more cameras up. Again, it's all this kind of oppression by the government and what have you. So, yeah, just I love just bringing back to the characters. I am going to have to rewatch, you know, season 1 as well as season 2, because there's just so much dialogue. There's so many references to other things. I just feel like I've maybe caught 20% of it, but I don't need to catch all the Easter eggs to really enjoy it. It's just everything about it I enjoy.
It's amazing. It's such a good show, and if it continues on, from what I've heard as well from people who have seen, because certain people have managed to watch early releases. I'm not one of those, to clarify, friends. I'm not subtly spoiling things for anyone intentionally. I just know vague timelines, and I've got a bit of a knowledge on me. But apparently, according to all the people that have seen all of the episodes early, next week is the big one. Next week is most people's favorite episodes. So my prediction is next week's going to be a big one. I don't know what Andor's going to be doing next week. If I had to guess, I would say next week's when we get introduced to K2SO, because we haven't had B2 Emo in this one at all. And there's a rumor going around, which I believe, like, I didn't start the rumor, to clarify, but I had this thought before the rumor, or the common fan theory, which is the consciousness of B2 Emo going into K2SO. They seem to be putting a lot of weight on B2 Emo and then not really caring about him at all. And I'd be like, it'd be kind of a waste. So I wonder if next episode we're going to have Mon doing her stuff. We're going to have Major Ghorman stuff going on. And I wonder if the Andor storyline is going to be going back and getting B2 Emo, and he falls apart, or he goes on a little mission with Andor and he gets broken down. Andor has to save his consciousness, and then he puts that into K2SO in some way. I don't know what that's going to be, but we know K2SO is going to pop up at some point because Tony Gilroy's mentioned it. He was in the trailer for like half a second, but
I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. But, you know, right. I mean, to be fair, K2SO is quite a major part in Rogue One, so it's a pretty safe assumption that K2SO would have. He was already very clearly friendly with Andor in Rogue One, so I think it's a safe assumption that pretty much everything in Rogue One you're going to get to see in that. But I might be wrong. It might be the finale. It might be the final 3 episodes are all about Andor and K2SO. I don't know. I haven't looked up any rumors. I try to avoid that stuff. But that's my theory, is B2 Emo becoming K2SO. But sorry about that minor spoiler for you, Dave.
That's all right.
I try to avoid those kind of
I'll
things.
have forgotten it by next week. It's fine.
Amazing stuff. Well, there's a couple of. I think I've pretty much said everything I want to say about Andor. I think you're probably in the same boat. Or is there anything else? You're all good?
No, that's it. I think I've waxed lyrical about how much I'm enjoying it, about all the character focus. I love the stuff on Ghorman. Although I keep thinking of it as Gore,
That's what I keep
because
doing
of because of the terrible 80s fantasy movies. But yeah, I'm intrigued as to where it goes, even though it's going to be horrendous. It's a weird feeling to absolutely love and yearn for watching the episode, and it's going to rip your heart out as well.
It's like Game of Thrones, isn't it? Like, you watch there, you're like, I love this show. Oh no, like bad things gonna happen.
This is going to go great for this couple here.
Oh yeah, they're so happy, and everything's going to be fine. Well, quick plugs then. I was meant to do plugs in the middle, but I forgot because we were so entrenched in the conversation. But you and I both appeared on the 20th Century Geek talking about Superman, Reeves' Superman. So I had never seen the 4 Superman movies with Christopher Reeve in them, ashamedly. I'd seen like parts of 1 and I knew bits of 2, but I knew nothing about 3 or 4. So I've now watched all 4 of them. So 1 and 2 are on the 20th Century Geek. We speak about that a lot. Your episode is the 3rd episode, so Superman 3. Again, 20th Century Geek. Check that out. Details will be in the description of that. Really great. I loved your commentary on that. I did not enjoy Superman 3 as much as you did, but I do not have the nostalgia that you do. And for all Patreon supporters, I have recorded and released 30 minutes of my thoughts on Superman 3, if anyone wants to hear that in detail. And next week, I will be doing my thoughts on Superman 4 as well, so more in-depth thoughts there. And I should be returning on 20th Century Geek for a little bonus episode about Superman as well, so that's going to be good fun. And I'm going to be watching all the other Superman, so Superman Returns. I'm going to rewatch the Snyder stuff, because I've never seen Superman Returns either, so I'll probably do that for Patreon. But also in addition to that, if you like this Star Wars content, obviously Star Wars Chit-Chat, loads of great stuff on social media and Instagram, loads of reels there. Genuine Chit-Chat on TikTok, that's where I'm posting a lot of the reels there. But YouTube, if you're not already watching this, please subscribe on YouTube, where there's going to be loads of shorts and snippets, loads of Star Wars content. And also myself, David Maff, we did Clone Wars Conversations, which where myself, David Maff, went through all episodes of the Clone Wars. And I'm currently in the process of re-editing the videos and putting them on there so they've all got visual cues, things popping up on screen to connect with a lot of the things that we're talking about. So really great fun there. And in addition to that, Dave, VHS Strikes Back. That's a great show. It's a great podcast I really enjoy that you do. Give us a little plug of that and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so Chris and myself go back and discuss all things from the VHS era. So we'll pick one video a particular week as we record now. I think we've just released The Wanderers, which is a 1979, technically gang movie. So more people know about The Warriors. And it was just a weird thing where these two things came out around about the same time. But I think The Wanderers is much more of a coming of age type movie, whereas The Warriors was more about these outlandish gangs, the baseball furies and stuff like that.
I love that film.
Yeah, it is interesting. But I actually probably like The Wanderers a little bit more, even though I'd never heard of it, never watched it before. It's definitely one to recommend. So yeah, but I think we don't often dip back quite into the 70s, but whenever we have, there's a different aesthetic to it. It's, for us, it's more about the 80s and 90s movies. That's when VCRs became, or VHS players became more accessible for normal people to buy and stuff. So yeah, come and have a listen to us there. And on the reality cast as well, Chris and I have also started to go on YouTube. I do have now more appreciation for people who do YouTube, because whereas, we can have a nice little chat, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have I worn this t-shirt before, or I've got to fix my hair or something. And what's the lighting like? And it's it's fucking hell, I can't be arsed with this.
Yeah, the video aspect's a lot more work.
Our first foray really into the YouTube world, but still basically a podcast, but in YouTube form.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you, Dave, for coming on. As always, really appreciate it. And also, people, if you want to hear a Revenge of the Sith commentary, because last weekend was the Revenge of the Sith anniversary of 20 years. I went and saw it at the cinema. Myself, Dave and Math, we watched Revenge of the Sith, and we spoke about it the entire time while we were watching it. So if you want to watch Revenge of the Sith, and you want to hear myself, Dave and Math, talk the whole way through it, and you want to hear lots of trivia dumps, bits of information, connections to other content and Clone Wars and stuff, please check that out as well. There's a version on YouTube, which has got like a visualizer thing to it, but there's mainly the audio version you want to hear on Star Wars Chit-Chat. So all of my content of Star Wars is all on the podcast feed of Star Wars Chit-Chat, but also there's the YouTube channel with a lot of video stuff as well. But friends, you can also check me out on Genuine Chit-Chat, where I do lots of interviews as well about other non-Star Warsy stuff. But friends, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, comment, tell me what you thought, all that great jazz, and review if you're listening on an audio podcast feed. And there's nothing left to say here aside from, may the Force be with you.
Always.